Hello, hello, and welcome to Where Do We Start, a podcast where we explore the stars, the self, and everything in between. I'm your host, Amber Mitchell, and today we're going to be talking about dealing with seasonal depression, overcoming the winter blues. So, we're at that point of the year where we are rapidly approaching winter, and the days are already getting shorter. And with the stress of the holidays, it can be really hard to just maintain a positive attitude and overcome the winter blues. So I definitely wanted to talk about that today. Now, I do just want to give a quick disclaimer that I am not a licensed professional. So if you are dealing with seasonal depression or going through something at this time, then definitely I want to encourage you to get professional help as well. But I am someone who has the experience of having dealt with seasonal depression for most of my life. And so I want to just share some of my tips and how I stay positive and keep a positive attitude during the winter, during the colder months, as well as, of course, for the rest of the year. So I think most people who know me would probably say that I am, for the most part, a very cheerful, happy person most of the time. That's kind of my baseline is I'm pretty optimistic, glass half full. In fact, I think a lot of people who know me very closely would say that I'm a little bit of a delusional optimist. And I would agree with that. But on the inside, I definitely feel like my spirit animal is like Wednesday Addams. And most people would not believe that or understand that. So I say that to say that although I am cheerful and optimistic most of the time, it's not because that's just my natural baseline. It's something that I've worked towards. It's a mindset that I've worked towards maintaining. And so one of the ways that I do that, in fact, I would say probably the main way that I maintain a positive attitude is through detachment. So I practice the law of detachment like nobody's business. But this has two parts to it. So one side of it is recognizing when things are really out of your control and don't really have a lot to do with you, right? Things that are around you, but do not have to do with you. And so you can choose to not let those things affect you. And then the other element of this is practicing not having a strong attachment to the outcome of things. And so the first thing that I'm talking about is learning not to take everything so personally. I used to work at a call center. In fact, I've worked at multiple call centers for several years. And I really had to learn pretty quickly. And the first time that I was working at a call center, I was also in college and I just had a lot of other things going on. It was a part-time job. And to be honest, I just really didn't take it that seriously. And I really had to learn that when you would get upset customers calling you and, you know, they want to cuss you out and just be upset about things, you realize pretty quickly, and especially I think me having studied psychology, I realized pretty quickly that they're not upset with me. That's the number one thing, right? They're not fussing at me or cursing me out because they're upset with me. They generally are upset about whatever the issue is. And really, that's usually not even the thing that they're really upset about. Like there could be several other things going on in their world, in their life that day. And receiving the wrong size shirt was just like the tip on the iceberg, the thing that sent them over, right? And so now they're calling and cussing at someone that they don't know on a customer service line, right? But for me, realizing that, okay, I just need to solve this person's problem and get them off my line. And being able to do that and then afterwards not ever think about it again, that is a skill, because I've definitely had those situations working in call centers where someone, you know, I'm having a bad day already and someone says something to me that really just messes with my mood for the rest of the day. But I would really get so frustrated with myself and I would really hate that I allowed someone who does not know me and doesn't know anything about me to ruin my whole day, right? And so once that happened a couple times, I really was like, no, I'm over this. I have to learn to take it for what it is. I'm here with you, interacting with you now. So I can't just completely ignore you. And so, these are things that we have to be mindful of, things in your life, in your situations, whatever it is that you're going through, right? Whatever the situation is that you're in, you have to deal with a certain part of that, right? You can't be so detached from everything that you just don't bother dealing with anything. Certain things you have to deal with in that moment while you're in that situation. But you have to recognize that you can detach from that and realize that, you know what? This person's not upset with me, or this situation is not my situation to deal with. This is not something that I have to take on as a part of my energy. And you can choose to detach from it. So you can choose to not take things so personally. And I practice this even with people who I'm very close to, because I recognize that, just for an example, I might talk with a close friend and they're going through something that's really bothering them and they're having this negative energy, and they might even, have an attitude with me or something like that. And I can recognize that, okay, you're dealing with something, you have an attitude with me. I'm not going to take that so personally as to now let it ruin my day or, have an attitude about it. I'll let you get over whatever you're going through. And then, we can talk about this later. So practicing just really being so above the BS that you're not bothered by it, right? And that you don't take everything in so personal. Just be conscious of the things that, you want to allow to impact you, right? So that's one element of it. The other element of that, I think, is to not be so attached to the outcomes of things. And a lot of people live by this principle of not having any expectations, right? Like, don't expect anything, so that way you can't be let down. And I disagree with that. I think that you should definitely have expectations. And again, I'm the type of person who generally expects things to go well. I generally expect things to work out. I generally just expect for, things to be easy. And that's not always true, right? Of course, everything doesn't always work out perfectly. I don't have a overall positive mindset and an optimistic outlook on life because my life is just perfect and everything always goes my way. Again, it's something that I've practiced and worked towards. But with having expectations, I think it is better to expect things to work out and expect things to go well, but have a detachment from that outcome. And so what that means is being okay even if it doesn't. So being okay even if things don't work out exactly as you expected, even if things don't go the best way possible. Now, another thing that I used to do when I was younger, and I really haven't had to practice this that much recently, but it's something that really, really helped me, is that I learned to categorize things in my life. So just a trigger warning, I did go through a very deep, dark period of depression after getting out of an abusive relationship for 2 years. And I dealt with this depression period for about a year and a half. And it was a really, really rough time for me. And the interesting thing, or I guess kind of ironic thing about that, is I was literally studying psychology at the time and like studying how to see symptoms of clinical depression. And so, having that example right there, it really made me realize, it gave me a lot of information that I would not have otherwise known about what I was actually going through. And one of those things is that rumination is one of the things that kind of fuels depression. And so this is when you really focus on and allow a certain thought to just sit with you, and you kind of go over it over and over again, and you really just like stay in that negative thought for a lot longer than you should. As I was getting over my depression, and anyone who's ever gone through depression can kind of understand what I mean when I say this, especially if it's not situational depression, right? Because a lot of people have situations happen in their life and they go through depression because of that. Whereas a lot of people have clinical depression, and it doesn't matter how good your life is. It doesn't matter what's going on in your life at that time. The chemicals in your brain make it difficult for you to be happy, right? And so anyone who's gone through depression can kind of understand when you are coming out of that depression and when you are having good moments in your life, there's kind of this thought in the back of your mind that's like, worrying about when the depression is going to come back, right? Like, oh, is this thing going to happen? It's going to trigger me into a depression. Or what if tomorrow I can't get out of bed? What if you have this kind of thought in your mind of like, what if this is all just over in a second, right? Like I'm up now, but what if I, fall back down? And one of the things, like I said, understanding that rumination is one of the things that fuels depression. So anytime something would happen that I would consider to be kind of like a trigger, something I felt like could trigger me into depression, I would categorize it in a way that I would kind of give it a scale. And so what I would do is give myself a time limit. And I mean, literally, I would set a timer. And this comes from a practice that I truly cannot remember, where I think I heard about it in my marriage and family relationship class. If I can remember, I'll like put it on the screen or in the comments or something, because it really was a good method of conflict resolution and realizing that if you're upset about something, kind of thinking about, will this thing upset me a week from now? Will this thing upset me a month from now? Will this thing upset me a year from now, right? And being able to answer those questions and recognizing, okay, if I'm not going to be upset about this next week, then I'm not going to worry about it now, right? Like it's not that big of a deal, basically. And so it's a really good way of just kind of monitoring your emotions and kind of going back to the first thing, not allowing something to get you all upset for the rest of your day when you think about it and you're like, I'm not even going to be worried about this by tomorrow. And so using that same principle, anytime something would come up that I would consider to possibly be a trigger to, make me really upset, I would ask myself, okay, like, is this gonna still matter to me tomorrow? Is this gonna still matter to me next week? What about next month? What about next year, right? And so depending on what the situation is, right, it's not to minimize whatever you're going through. That's not the point. You definitely want to acknowledge the fact that something is upsetting you and give it its space, but only give it the space that it deserves. Don't allow it to take over your whole day. Don't lose a whole day because you're upset about something, or lose a whole week or month because you're upset about something, right? And so depending on how serious I felt that the thing was, right, I would give myself a time frame. And like I said, I would literally set a timer and say, okay, I just need like 15 minutes to get over this, right? Or I need an hour, or I need 3 hours. I think I would give myself a limit of like 4 hours. I would never allow myself more than 4 hours to really like ruminate on something, because to me that felt like it was pushing it a little too far of like, okay, now I'm taking too much time on this. So I would give myself whatever time frame that I allotted and do whatever it was. I kind of looked at this as a time to just allow myself to feel the feelings, just allow myself to go through the motions and get it all out, right? So I would cry, I would journal, I would hit things, throw things, I would take a walk. Sometimes I would just literally stare at the ceiling and think about the thing. So whatever it is that helps you. Like I remember one time when I was working at the call center, I had a situation happen. Someone texted me something that just really upset me. And it was kind of like out of the blue. It was about a guy that I was dating, and it set me off. Like it really just upset me. And I'm sitting there at my desk and I feel like, oh man, like I'm just about to start crying right here at my desk. And I was like, okay, I'm working, right? I'm at work. So, okay, we get 15-minute breaks. I've got 15 minutes to like deal with this so that I can continue working. And if I need to deal with this later when I get home, then I will. But I really just was like, okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom. I took a 15-minute break. I went to the bathroom and I just like cried in there for like 15 minutes. And once that timer went off, it's almost become a thing for me where it really is like a switch. Like the timer went off and I'm like, okay, gotta move on. Can't sit here and deal with this thing. And it really does help if you give yourself something to do after, right? In this particular case, I only had 15 minutes. I had something else that I had to go do, right? I had to go back to work. But giving yourself something to do after so that once that timer goes off, you're not tempted to just sit there and continue to think about it, right? So you can say, okay, time's up. I spent an hour doing whatever I needed to do to get through this emotion, right? To feel this feeling and think about how, to feel this feeling and really process it, right? Give yourself that time to process. And then, okay, now I've got something else to do. Now I have to move on. And, and it is kind of like you're allowing yourself to not think about it, right? You're doing something else to kind of get your mind off of it for a while. And if you have to come back to it, that's fine. But it really just is important that you don't allow yourself to ruminate on things and allow things to impact you for longer than they should. And I think even just the process of thinking about something that's upsetting you and asking yourself those questions of like, am I still going to be upset about this tomorrow? Am I still going to be upset about this in a week? It really does help you process it and understand, okay, you know what? Like, no, I won't be upset about this tomorrow. This really isn't that big of a deal. Or to say, you know what? Yes, I am going to be upset about this tomorrow. I am going to be upset about this next week. And this is why. Like, this does go deeper for me. And you can understand those feelings a lot better. One of the things that I learned while I was simultaneously dealing with depression and learning about depression, my abnormal psychology professor said something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, of ships without anchors sink during storms. And that phrase has stuck with me for a long time. Now, she was referring to depression and how it's a way to kind of recognize it in other people, to recognize in your friends the severity of certain issues. And this is not to say that people with like families and children and great jobs and a lot of responsibilities don't also end up, ending their lives. This is not to say that, but she said it to say that it is something you should really pay attention to when someone is really going through a dark depression and, you're worried about them, that if they don't have certain anchors in their life, that it is a lot easier for them, right, to sink during a storm. And so taking that and understanding, of course, how to use that in terms of people and your friends, people around you that might be going through a hard time, I think it's a really good thing to just keep in mind. But it's also a really good thing to keep in mind for yourself to kind of ask yourself, because I remember when she said that, I was thinking about myself and I was like, well, what's anchoring me, right? Like, what do I feel like anchors me here, that keeps me here essentially? What makes me feel like, it's worth getting up in the morning for, it's worth continuing through a really hard time, right? And understanding what that is for you, right? And I think that it is not so much as a good idea to place so much value on material things, right? If that is what it is for you, then that's okay, right? And so understanding what your anchors are in life. And so for me, I really had to evaluate, like, what are my anchors? What are the things that are keeping me here, keeping me, wanting to continue on. And so, be that a goal, right? For me at the time, it was finishing college, because I felt like I had worked so hard to get to that point, just to get to the point of being in college. And so finishing and getting the degree was a major anchor for me. Certain people in my life, right? And, certain relationships and whatever it is for you, just kind of understanding what that anchor is. And so this is one of the things that I really think can keep you positive during a difficult time, because it's something that is anchoring you, something that is motivating you and pushing you to want to continue, right? To want to continue on and to get out of bed every day, because sometimes even that is just really hard. And so with that, having an anchor, I think also kind of leads into my next tip, which is perspective. And of course, I feel like you probably expected me to say this, but gratitude. That's anyone and everyone is going to tell you that a huge part of maintaining a positive attitude and a positive outlook on life is a mentality of gratitude. And this is not just some cliche BS that people like to say. It really is true that, life is hard. Like, life be lifing, especially these days. But there is a lot to be grateful for. And your perspective on things will really help you realize that. I know that I often think about my life right now and how I am literally living in things that I prayed for. And having that perspective, as well as thinking about the way that things have been in the past. I didn't have the easiest upbringing. And so thinking about just where I've come from in life, it's something that I can always have that perspective of like, wow, no matter how much I want in life, no matter how much better I think my life could be right now, I can always look at it and realize that for what it is, like I live a pretty good life, right? And there are small things, very small things that you might not even think about that indicate that you live a good life, right? And I say that, of course, with the full understanding that I have a lot of privilege. Like I have a lot of privilege as someone who lives in America, works a decent job, has a roof over my head, not in constant fear of my own safety, of my life, a lot of things, right? And so that perspective, just being able to have gratitude, it doesn't have to be on that scale, right? But if you can just take a moment, and this is something I used to do daily, and I really do want to get back into the habit of doing, but before my feet would even touch the ground, first thing in the morning, I would just think of 5 things that I'm grateful for. And sometimes it was really hard to get to those 5. Like it was really hard to get to 5. But sometimes I would get to 5, and I had my like few that I would just kind of keep on rotation. Like obviously I'm thankful that I woke up, thankful that I have a roof over my head, whatever the case may be, right? And other times, like I would have like 15 or 20 things that I could think of that I would be grateful for. And that really set my day so that, I'm already starting off with this mindset of like, I've got a lot to be grateful for. Yeah, there's a lot that, a lot I could complain about, but there's also a lot that I can be grateful for. And another thing I used to do so I have a lot of journals. I'm someone who I journal for real. I've got journals for my journals. Okay. But one of my journals that I really love and that I encourage you to do is I started a journal that was really like a daily wins journal is what we'll call it. And this was actually a method for me. This is kind of a separate topic, but it was actually something that I started doing because I have a really hard time bragging on myself. I think maybe I'm a little too humble in a sense that I kind of downplay my wins, my successes, and I guess just myself a lot. Not so much anymore, but it was something that I recognized that I downplay myself a lot. I don't celebrate myself enough when something good happens or when I achieve something. And so I started this journal so that every day at the end of the day, I would write at least one win of the day. And it could be like anything that happened that I would brag to someone else about, but like me, I'm too humble to go telling someone that like, oh, hey, this great thing happened to me today, or I did this thing today, right? And so I would write it in a journal, and I would, at least one thing every day of like, I would consider this thing to be a win. And most days, I had like at least 3 or 4 things I could write. And some days I had like a long, like a lot of things. Like today was just a win all around. Like I had so many things. And some days I just had like 1 or 2, but they would be big things. It was like, yo, this is a big deal for me that this happened, or that I was able to achieve this after I've been working for so long. And so without really realizing it, that turned into a gratitude journal, because looking back and reading through some of those days, I realized that they're not just me celebrating myself, but they are essentially statements of gratitude. And so that is something that I highly recommend. I highly recommend that you start a daily wins journal, because it's something that I think can help improve your self-confidence, your self-worth, as well as having a mindset of gratitude. The last thing that I want to touch on is, and there's 2 elements to this, but it has to do with the energy that is around you. Now, the first element of this is the people that you have around you, and keeping positive people around you is super important to maintaining a positive attitude, especially when things are rough. And so this can be really hard, especially I understand we're getting to the holidays. You're going to be around a lot more people than you might normally be around, and being around family members who can potentially be very triggering, right? I understand that. No one is perfect, of course, right? Like just because you are working on having a more positive mindset and being a more positive person doesn't mean that everyone else around you is doing that, right? So people are going to have their bad days. People are going to need to vent. vent, and, they're going to go through their own things. So I'm not saying that you should dismiss people when that is the situation, and I'm sure you can think of someone like this, but when you have people in your life who are constantly talking about negative things, constantly wanting to gossip, constantly wanting to talk about bad news, things that spread anxiety and fear, people who are constantly complaining about whatever's going on in their life or someone else's life, and that's like the main thing that you talk about when you're with that person. Something that I use as a gauge, right, for the people who I interact with is how I feel after I spend time with them. So as a person, one of my main goals, period in life, one of my main goals as a person is for the people around me to be better and feel better when they leave me than they did before they got there, right? If I'm interacting with you and I'm spending time with you, my only goal is that you feel good about that you feel better when you leave than you did when you got there. And so I use that as a gauge. Like if I spend time with someone and then afterwards I feel depressed, right? I feel sad, I feel anxious, then that's a key for me that like, maybe I shouldn't spend so much time with this person. And I'm not talking about just one time, because again, especially girls, we talk about the things that are going on in our lives. You might have a day where you are sitting with a friend and you guys are talking about some heavy things. And that's not what I'm talking about. That's a one-time thing. But if it's all the time, like if all you ever do is talk about heavy things, all you ever do is trauma dump on one another, all you ever do is complain about things, gauge that, look at that and say, every time after I spend time with this person, I don't feel so good, right? I'm not in the best mood. And so that can be your indicator that you need to limit your time with this person. Or if it's someone who you're really close to and you want to continue spending the same amount of time with, let them know that, bring that up, because a lot of times people don't even realize that they're doing that, right? They've become so accustomed to thinking about these things. It's kind of their internal dialogue of, anxiety or, conflict and complaint. Like they might just have this internal dialogue that they don't even realize that they're always being negative. And so if you mention it like, hey, I love spending time with you, but we talk about a lot of negative things when we're around each other. Like you complain a lot about things, explaining to them, because again, they might not even realize it. And one thing I want to say about that is that my best friend started doing something that I really appreciated and that I've carried on through the rest of my relationships. And that is, she would ask for consent to vent. And now that it's become something I'm so used to, like once she started doing that, I look at when people don't ask for consent to vent as like they're being extremely rude. And so what I mean by this is it's so simple, but she would just ask me if we would get on the phone or we would be in person with each other. And she would just say, are you in a good space right now for me to vent to you? I've got some stuff going on that I'm dealing with. Are you in a good space for me to talk to you about that? Is it okay if I just vent to you for a minute about something? Man, I'm so aggravated right now. Is it okay if I just tell you, what I'm aggravated about? And that small thing, just asking like, hey, is it okay, right? If I vent, if I dump this on you, if I tell you, are you in a good space to hear that? That really like just changed the way that the conversation would go, right? Because by the end of that conversation, usually we'd both be in a better place. Like usually, we have something to say about the situation. If nothing else, she just got it off her chest. But usually by the end of that conversation, we both will have gotten to like a more positive mindset, right? I got so used to that when people would just start venting to me right off, I would be like, whoa, hold on. Like you didn't ask me if you could do that yet. You didn't ask how I was doing or how my day, was going on with me right now. That's very rude. And it's something that I started practicing as well with everyone else in my life, that like if I am dealing with something that I'm upset with, especially because I have such a tendency to keep things to myself when I'm really upset, I just tend to, because my thought process is I don't want my negative energy to leak onto other people. So I'm like, I got to keep this to myself. I'm just going to deal with it on my own, right? But that's not always the most healthy thing to do. And so I started doing that as well. When I need to vent to someone, someone, I ask them first, like, can I vent to you for a second? Do you have a minute for me to vent to you? Or are you okay? How's your day going? Are you in a good space for me to vent to you? And even sometimes I think I'll feel worse about like if someone's saying like, oh, I'm having a great day, I'd be like, oh, okay, I don't want to make your day bad by venting to you about something that is really upsetting me. But nonetheless, just asking for consent, I think is such a good practice, a good thing to put into practice. And when you start doing that to the people that you're close to, they'll pick it up, right? Because she never asked me to do that to her. It's just something she would do. And then I realized like, oh, I love that she does that. I love that she asks me first if it's okay to vent. And so I just started doing that as well. Now, the other thing about this, like I said, is that sometimes you might have people around you who are always negative and they don't even realize how negative they are. And one of the reasons why they may not realize how negative they are is because they're unaware of how much what they're consuming is affecting their energy. And so that's the last thing that I want to touch on, is that everything you consume, and I do mean literally the food that goes in your body as well as energetically around you, everything that you consume impacts your energy. And so you want to be very mindful of what you're consuming. So I'm no nutritionist, so I'm not going to go on about like high vibration food or anything like that. But just be mindful, like pay attention to your body, right? Your body will tell you if you eat something and after you don't feel so great, that's your body telling you, hey, that's not quite high vibrational, right? You feel much different when you eat a bunch of junk than you do if you eat a bunch of healthy food. So it's really that simple. Be mindful of the things that you're putting in your body and how that can be impacting your energy. It really is true that, the better that you eat, the cleaner that you eat, the better you're going to feel overall, but also what you're consuming and the energy around you. We have to be really mindful of the things that we're consuming. And I want to put a pin, especially in the things that you consume through social media, because what you don't realize is that a lot of the time you are interacting with things on social media and the intent of it is to get you anxious or fearful or angry, right? Because you have these high negative emotions and high negative reactions to it, which is going to make you interact with it, right? Now, the opposite of that, of course, is things that give you high positive emotions. So things that are extremely funny or make you really happy or, evoke feelings of love or compassion. But unfortunately, the reality is of our world that it's a lot easier to get people to interact with negative content than it is to get them to interact with positive content. Be mindful of that when you're scrolling, right? That sometimes, especially if you don't even realize that after you're done looking at your phone or scrolling, that you're like in a bad mood now and you don't even know why, because you might not even remember what it was that you saw, but now you're in a bad mood. So that, as well as the shows that you're consuming, right? The things you're watching on TV. I know a lot of people love to watch scary movies and like true crime documentaries, and that's fine. If that's your thing, that's your thing. I personally avoid those types of things. Like I don't watch a lot of scary movies during like spooky season. Yeah, I watch all the scary movies because to me, that's considered like I'm being in a festive, like I'm participating in the spooky season, the festivities of spooky season. So, I'll watch scary content then. But I'm even with that, I'm mindful of afterwards, like I've got to switch over and watch something that's more positive, watch something, a little happier. I don't want that negative, that scary energy to sit with me, right? And for some people, you recognize it as entertainment. So I think even like reality TV has just a lot of negative energy about it. And again, I'm not trying to like yuck anybody's yum. If that's the thing you love watching and you feel that, it's entertaining for you and it's uplifting for you, then good. But what I'm saying is to be aware of like, if you watch a lot of reality TV and you become the things that you consume, right? Like you're literally taking in that energy. And if you watch a lot of reality TV, a lot of drama, and you see those things reflecting in your life, or you feel negatively after you watch it, then just consider that, like, hey, maybe it's because of that. And I have an interesting example of this. So there's a show that is widely popular, like probably everyone has at least seen an episode of it, right? It's a very loved show, very popular show, and I love the show. But I noticed that after watching it, so I was watching it for a few weeks. I was trying to catch up because there's a lot of seasons, a lot of episodes. And so I was kind of binging it, and I would watch it at night because it's just that type of show that you watch at night. It is like a fantasy type of show. And there are some heavy elements to it. Like there are some things that happen that are pretty heavy, but they're not the core, like part of the show. The core of the show, I would not say is heavy. It's more like fantasy, sci-fi, I guess, if you will. Right. And it occurred to me after watching it for a few weeks in a row that I was having these terrible dreams, and that it was just kind of, I would have this feeling, like a little bit of an unsettling feeling, as well as I noticed after watching like episodes back to back that there is a specific topic, and I'm not gonna say because it would definitely be like a trigger, but there's a specific thing that gets mentioned a lot during the show. And it's almost like I was like, why did they say this? Like every other episode they mention this happening to someone. And so, as much as I love the show, right? Because I love the story, I love the characters, I love everything about the show, but I had to pay attention to my body and realize that I'm having terrible dreams after I watch this show, and I just generally feel kind of unsettled about it, right? And so I trust my intuition more than anything. And so I know that there probably is something energetically not so pure, not so positive about that show. There's something going on there underneath, right? But I also still really enjoy that content, and I really enjoy the show. So I've had to kind of form that balance of like limiting myself, right? Limiting how much I watch it, because I was watching like 3 or 4 episodes a night. And so kind of limiting that time of how much I'm watching it each day, as well as, not watching it right before I go to bed, feeling unsettled right before I go to bed, but allowing myself the time to kind of cleanse that, right? So that's just something that I would say be mindful of, even if it's things that you really enjoy. Just pay attention to your body and how you feel about it, because your body will tell you if something is good for you or not. So listen to your intuition and pay attention to how you feel energetically. If something is unsettling to you, then you should not be consuming it. So that's pretty much where I want to leave that. But on the note of consuming positivity, if you want even more positive content in your life, then I highly recommend that you follow the pod if you're not already. And you can also follow me over on Instagram for daily updates, as well as join our amazing community of Patreon members, where you'll get exclusive bonus content and deep dives into some of the things that we talk about here. But until next time, take care and keep on shining.